Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Trucker Podcast. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. It is 10:23 a.m. here on the 11th of December. Good morning to everybody, or afternoon, or evening, depending what time it is. What we've learned about the so-called Freedom Convoy so far. Thank you for joining me this morning. Good morning, everybody. What is happening? Here it is Sunday morning. Woke up this morning and it is like a little bit cool this morning, but we have snow on the ground. Really nothing to write home to mom about. A couple of inches, which, it was expected and that. So, yeah. Yeah, so today, I actually have to get on Amazon. There's a tripod that I was looking at and thinking about getting out and about in the city and going around and doing some videos. And that probably, I don't know, maybe 5-6 minute long videos. One particular place I want to get to is Victoria Park. It's right downtown and it's all lit up at night. I got the Christmas lights out, all the Christmas decorations out, and go around that park and, talk about that park and what it was like when I was a kid out there playing in the snow and skating at the park outdoors and stuff like that. So kind of another plan in the works. So, yeah. But what have we learned so far? After the inquiry that they had over the federal government invoking the Federal Emergency Act back last February, this thing will let me get down to the bottom of my page. See what happens here. Hope everybody is doing fine today. I think this is the one that I want to be looking at here. Yes, it is. Hope this is the right one. Like that. Yep, it is. So, November the 25th, just last month, was the end of the public hearing portion of the Public Order Emergency Commission. And many of us, or all of us Canadians, are still reeling from what was revealed to the public. And there was a lot of stuff revealed to the public. This was a 6-week affair, this public, or not a public, but the commission, the inquiry that took place. And over the course of the 6 weeks, there's thousands of documents were reviewed and hundreds of hours of testimonies were logged. and is to establish the events that led to the first use of Canada's Emergency Act. And what is it? We've talked about this. The Emergency Act was invoked by the Trudeau government on February the 14th to quell the out-of-control Freedom Convoy protesters in the nation capital. And that's just an understatement. Out of control. Bouncy castles, hot tubs, the big tent, stages set up for entertainment. It's just like a three-ring circus going on here. The governmental authorities in times of an emergency. So the government, with the authority to freeze the finances of those connected to the convoy, blockades, and to ban travel to the protest zones, as well as the powers to prohibit people from bringing minors to an unlawful assemblies, and commandeer tow truck companies to remove transport trucks that have been blocking the Ottawa downtown core since January 29th, when it all began on that weekend. Heavy fines and jail time. Also gave the police are also given the ability to impose fines up to $100,000, as well up to 1 year in jail for participating or continued protest of the blockading of the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor, Ontario. And that went on for about a week, which was really surprising to even allow it to go that long, being that it is the most, I guess you say, the busiest crossing between Canada and the United States in North America. Now, was this a necessary step by the federal government to invoke the Federal Emergency Act? Well, the government's use of the Emergency Act was justified by the government as being a necessary step to deal with the unprecedented threat to Canada's democracy. Well, we had all kinds of different groups in this so-called Freedom Convoy. Could be potentially, well, it did. I mean, it caused a lot of problems. Businesses weren't able to open up. People weren't being able to go to work in the downtown core of Ottawa. Harassment, intimidation. And they had lots of worries over violence. The one particularly, there was in Coutts, Alberta, discovering weapons, ammunition, and body armor. Who knows what else? What other threats, or could potentially take place, because even the largest protests that took place in Ottawa, we had no idea what was in those trucks, what people had. Right, and the government was worried about the foreign financing of the Freedom Convoy protesters and feared the violence that could follow if steps were taken to quell the protesters. Well, the financing, foreign financing, most of the financing came from Canada. whereas they thought it was a lot of it came from the United States, but it didn't. And then the witness list with the evidence that were given by key several government ministers, public safety minister, the defense minister, and the deputy prime minister. And on the Freedom Convoy side, convoy organizers, there was Barber, there was Litch, there was King, and alongside other protest leaders and participants as well. There was something like over 75 witnesses. And who else testified? And other major witnesses, including officials from the city of Ottawa, as well as the RCMP commissioner, the Ontario Provincial Police Commissioner, the former Ottawa Police Services, the Chief of Police, and the Canadian Security Intelligence Services, and what would happen, with the first big revelation of this inquiry, that the commissioner or the chief of the RCMP did not believe that the government had exhausted all its options before looking at the Emergency Act. There was no other options. These people were asked to leave several times, and they refused to do so. The Ottawa Police Services couldn't do anything. Nothing. Oh, this is just going to be a weekend protest. Like all protests in Ottawa. Generally, that's what it is. And usually, with a protest going on in Ottawa, the police services monitor the situation. And the people go home. More tools available. So the night before the government invoked the Emergency Act, the commissioner wrote that she believed that the government had not used all available tools. Well, sometimes a hammer fixes some things, but a hammer can't fix everything. Just a figure of speech. See, the Federal Emergency Act has a really big tool bag. It has all the tools to deal with a public disorder or any sort of an emergency. Compared to what the Ottawa Police Services has in their tool bag, the RCMP, what they have in their tool bag, the Ontario Provincial Police, what they have in their tool bag, compared to the government has all the tools. And they pick and choose the most effective tools in order to deal with a public disorder. And which tools are going to be necessary. And what tools are going to do the job. So the biggest one in the inquiry came on October the 19th. With the Canadian Security Services indicated that there was no foreign involvement in the freedom protest. No, I don't think there was. There are no foreign actors identified at this point supporting the financing of this convoy. In his briefing during his teleconference with senior officials at different levels of government. Well, there was some foreign financing, but like I said, it all didn't come from outside of Canada. Most of it came from within Canada. Foreign funding during the protest. As the crisis was unfolding, the Trudeau government used the threat of foreign funding of protesters as one of the main points of evidence used to invoke the Emergency Act. So from abroad, so the Freedom Convoy support from abroad, these illegal blockades are being heavily supported by individuals in the United States and from elsewhere around the world. Trudeau said in the address in the House of Commons, and that we see that roughly half of the funding that is flowing to the barricades here coming from the United States. That's not the case. It wasn't half. Maybe a quarter of it, of the funding came from the United States. Most of it, like I said, came from within Canada. But the individual from the Canadian Security Agency still supported the use of the Emergency Act and appeared that regardless of justification, he supported Trudeau's use of the Emergency Act, stating that the regular tools were just not enough to address the situation. And that's when you have to put on the big tool belt. And that's when you have to put on the big boy pants in order to deal with this situation. Because nobody else was stepping up. A threat to the Canadian security justified the act. This individual also believed that the totality of the circumstances had led to the point where the existence of the protesters could be legitimately viewed as a threat to the security of Canada and pushed for invoking the Emergency Act. Concerns about violence erupting? Well, look at Coutts, Alberta. They had weapons, ammunition, body armor. So the biggest concern of the government officials was the fear that violence could have broken out in Alberta, and the act, the Emergency Act of warnings have received about the real risk of violence, as many protesters were willing to go down down for the cause. Good morning. How you doing today? I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. Thank you for joining me this morning. I know I'm already well into 20 minutes into the show, and that's okay. So just a little recap for you. Just last month, around the 25th of November, it was a 6-week-long inquiry into the use of the Federal Emergency Act to clear out the blockades, the demonstrators from the downtown core in Ottawa that took place back this year of January and February. The so-called Freedom Convoy, as I call it, the Karen Carnival. Over 75 people and over thousands and thousands of documents and testimonies from federal government all right down to citizens and the organizers themselves appeared at this inquiry to give their take of this so-called Freedom Convoy. And of course, when concerns about violence erupting in Coutts, Alberta, down at the border between Canada and the United States, the authorities discovered weapons, ammunition, body armor. And that these protesters were willing to go down for the cause. The largest protest was in Ottawa. These were just border barricades at Coutts, Alberta, Windsor, Ontario. Nothing compared to the size that took place in Ottawa. No telling what they had in their trucks, what they had in their vehicles. Because they ended up clearing the Coutts barricades from that border. I think it was a day before the federal government invoked the Federal Emergency Act. Now, more than 11 people were arrested in Alberta, right? So on February the 14th, the RCMP arrested more than a dozen Coutts Freedom Convoy protesters and seized weapons that included rifles, handguns, and body armor. So that was actually on the day. That was actually on the day the federal government invoked the Federal Emergency Act on February the 14th. So there was no telling what the protesters, the organizers, whatever had in Ottawa, the capital of Canada, where the largest protest was taking place. The Ottawa police force was unprepared. Well, that's just an understatement. They knew what was coming. And like any protest, anything, people are going to protest about what the government is doing when it comes to the federal government. People are going to ascend on Ottawa. That's the capital. That's where the parliament buildings are. That's where people are going to go protest. And generally, it's just a weekend protest. People come, they protest, they have their say, they go home. So now you have this large convoy coming across Canada, stretching 20 miles. You have smaller convoys coming out of Ontario. You have smaller convoys coming out of Quebec, out of Newfoundland, other places going to ascend onto Ottawa. How in the world they would think, I'm talking about the Ottawa police because, they deal with the protests in Ottawa all the time. So to this is nothing new to them. They're assuming that it's just going to be a weekend protest like most protests are, all protests are. All the intel that's being gathered from the time this convoy started is that the Ottawa police force disregarded it. No, this is just going to be a weekend protest, like it always is. Nothing's changed. And like I said, the chief of police thought it would just be a quick protest. The former Ottawa police chief, he testified that his force's planning was inadequate because he believed the intelligence from the Ontario Provincial Police suggested the protesters would not dig in Ottawa. And to this day, he says that even with the benefit of hindsight, he says he did not have any clear impression or saw any clear conclusion that there was going to, to have anything more than what he believed by his team and other intel. The evidence said otherwise. The evidence presented indicated that the chief of police and the Ottawa Police Force had advance warnings that the Freedom Convoy protesters would not remove themselves from the capital until all vaccine mandates were removed and a new government was installed. How the fuck does that work? Organizers wanted to get together with the Governor General and other politicians and form a party to overthrow the federal government. It doesn't work that way. This is how inept some people really are on how things work in this country. Our own premier, now don't be confused with prime ministers and premiers. Premiers are head of the provinces. The prime minister is the head of the country. Now, Doug Ford, the premier of Ontario, he invoked the Ontario Emergency Act. He declared an emergency here in Ontario because of the blockade in Windsor at the Detroit-Windsor crossing, the busiest crossing in North America. Very different than what was going on in Ottawa and quite smaller. You may have altogether, for a blockade at the bridge, you had maybe 50 trucks or less, but enough to interrupt any crossing, enough to interrupt trade and the movements of other transport trucks coming across from the United States or going into the United States. It was enough to disrupt that. They were able to clear that border before the Emergency Act was invoked. And it wasn't until, the governor of Michigan, and this was affecting, it wasn't just affecting Michigan, in Indiana. It affected it all the way from Kentucky all the way down to Tennessee. It wasn't until then when the big three automakers start to make noise. Ford, Chrysler, General Motors. Wasn't until then when we were able to clear that mess up. And Doug Ford, he was called to testify, but he refused to testify. And somehow, one way or the other, he didn't have to go to Ottawa to testify in this inquiry into the use of the Federal Emergency Act. As far as I'm concerned too, when the Ottawa Police Services, finally figured it out that they screwed up, and then calling on the government, provincial government mostly, say, hey, you know what, we need more help. Doug threw a little bit of help. Doug Ford threw a little bit of help their way. Gave them more police, but it still wasn't enough. Now, the Prime Minister, he was the very last witness at this inquiry back last month. He was the final witness to testify at the commission, and his testimony revealed a great deal about the inner workings of the government in the days leading up to invoking of the Federal Emergency Act. Now, see, the Federal Emergency Act, it has the largest tool bag. It has all of the tools. Right? And one tool that he didn't need to use was the military. Now, he talked about the federal government wasn't allowed to review the Ottawa Police Force's plans to curtail demonstrators, as well as the fact that he was very against using the military to get the situation in Ottawa under control. So what's going to happen now? So with the public hearing portion of the commission is over, we the Canadians will have to wait for the official Paul Rouleau, who oversaw the hearings, to see if Trudeau's use of the Emergency Act was truly justified under existing law. Well, hypothetically, if he didn't invoke the Federal Emergency Act, the organizers of the so-called Freedom Convoy, they made it very clear that they were not going anywhere until all mandates and all restrictions were lifted. October, just a couple months back, it was October the 1st when the federal government removed all mandates and restrictions at the federal level. They were the last to go. So were they planning on staying from last January all the way to October? Do you really think that would happen? Definitely not. Do you think they're going to be there for months on end? Blockading, demonstrating, hot tubbing, bouncy castles, blaring of horns, partying? This was a three-ring circus that had all of the elements of a three-ring circus. You even had the clowns. That was all the organizers. There's no way that they would be staying there. By invoking the Federal Emergency Act, it gave the RCMP the power to uphold the law in the provincial jurisdiction, in the municipality jurisdiction. It compelled the tow truck companies to remove any transport truck or vehicle that refused. And of course, then all police forces from across Canada sent officers and special detachments of these police forces to ascend on Ottawa and clean up this circus. They gave the government the authority to freeze bank accounts of those organizers. Now you got to remember, GoFundMe, they stopped that funding, not the government. One of the organizers, Tamara Lynch, she was able to get $1 million out of all the funding. Her bank account was froze. Pat King's bank account was froze. All the organizer bank accounts were frozen. So when GoFundMe stopped that portion of it, the organizers, thinking as crafty as they are, maybe even think they're crafty, I don't know, would go to Give, Send, Go. Start trying to raise money from that. They managed, this is just mind-boggling. They managed to raise almost $20 million. That is mind-boggling. But once the Federal Emergency Act was invoked, none of that money would be funneled to the organizers. It would cease and desist, and the government will take it. And it's funny how, not just Give, Send, Go, but, other people from outside of Canada weighing in on, Canada, the government can't invoke the Federal Emergency Act. Oh, the government can't seize bank accounts. Oh, the government can't do this. The government can't do that. You better frickin' well believe they can. There's something like $5 million in escrow being held by the courts because there is over a $300 million class action lawsuit against the organizers. And the lawyers for those citizens want to include other truckers and trucking firms into that class action lawsuit. Businesses that were shuttered and that were allowed to open couldn't open their businesses. They had to shut down the Centertown Mall because protesters were going through the malls not wearing a mask and just causing bullshit. And they had to close that mall. That was the very first weekend. That was on the 29th of January. And then that mall stayed shuttered for the next 3 weeks. So those businesses in the mall could not open. Those employees could not go to work. So you imagine how many stores are in a mall. How many people work in a mall? All those people couldn't go to work. And then you had all the adjacent streets and all the businesses down there where people couldn't get in to go to work and employees couldn't go to work. Then you had all the harassment and intimidation. And then you had all the blaring of the horns day and night, fireworks going off day and night, music blasting into the wee hours of the morning, day in, day out for 3 weeks. Never seen anything like it in my life. People, first time probably in my life that I've seen people cheering on truckers as if though they're their savior. Oh, it's the truckers that's going to save us. It's the truckers that's going to get these mandates and restrictions lifted. To this day, anybody crossing the land border from Canada into the United States has to show proof of vaccination. That still stands today. So that small fringe of truckers who got all pissed off because the government mandated vaccines for all essential workers coming back from the United States into Canada. And when that was taking place a week later, the United States mandated that anybody crossing the land border into the United States from Canada or Mexico must show proof of vaccination. And that still stands today. So they're having a little hissy fit. And then it's truckers against truckers. Oh, because you got vaccinated, now I'm going to block this bridge. I'm going to barricade this bridge because I'm pissed off. And I'm going to prevent anybody from coming and going into the United States back into Canada. And I'm going to disrupt trade, and I'm just going to upset the economy. I'm going to piss off a whole lot of people because I'm having a tantrum. %80 of the trucking of the trucking industry here in Canada got vaccinated. And how do we know that? Because the trucking companies will want to see proof that their drivers are vaccinated, because they are not going to risk sending their drivers into the United States and then have to come back into Canada and then have to quarantine for 14 days. That's how we know that 80% of the truckers were vaccinated. Except for this small fringe. I mean, I don't care. I mean, if you don't want to get vaccinated, you don't want to protect your friends, you don't want to protect your family, that's your business. Whatever. But people saying, oh, this was just a freedom convoy, freedom protest. This was all peaceful. This was all good and all in good. For a weekend, it's all in good. You protest for a weekend, then you go home. You said your piece. Pat yourself on the back. Government heard you. It's going to be a while before we get any answers of whether or not was the use of the Federal Emergency Act necessary. It's going to be a while. You remember, over 75 people testified. They got over thousands and thousands of pages of evidence and testimonies. It's going to take a while. I don't expect to hear any answers until maybe next summer. Maybe even longer. They actually have up to a year. Have to wait to see what happens, whether or not it was necessary. And even the Canadian intelligence agencies, even at the end of the day, they said it was necessary. And even after hearing all testimonies from top officials, in the policing, that the government, didn't use all the tools that they had available before invoking the Federal Emergency Act. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they just gave enough tools that they thought might have been necessary. I mean, they were not, thinking maybe it's not necessary. Maybe we just, give you a handful of tools and, make do. Obviously, that didn't work. Misuse of the tools, they didn't know how to use them. So finally the government says, Christ's sakes, you know what? I gave you the tools. You don't know how to use the tools. You can't clean up this goddamn mess. Well, I'm going to have to pull out the big tool bag. And that's what they did. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But earlier when the show started here, I don't know. I mean, did any of you go out, go on YouTube there and search the Truckers Podcast FYI? I have some short videos up there. So it will be the very first time that you will be able to see me. And I will be posting short videos up on there for upcoming episodes here on the Truckers Podcast FYI on Podbean. And of course, when my next show, when I'm here sitting talking to you behind the microphone, then, my next upcoming show. And also, when I stop, thinking about, ordering this tripod that I want, to go out and about in the city that I reside in and make some short videos to post up on YouTube um, as well, and then talking about that on my podcast and that. So, and like I said, I don't know, last week or the week before, I said, yeah, I won't be doing live shows on YouTube. I'll just be posting up short snippets, just a minute and a half, maybe 2 minute length in videos of the upcoming episodes here on the Truckers Podcast. So you go to YouTube, search the Truckers Podcast, FYI, and you'll see. Actually, I did post one video that was like 21 minutes long on homelessness. And the other three, I think, are, just for upcoming episodes of the Truckers Podcast. So you can check that out. And that, so yeah, other than that, just been busy, just doing things that I need to be doing. I mean, this is something that I do on weekends, but I do from time to time come out in the middle of the week. If I didn't have a really long day at work, because I generally work anywhere from 10 to 12 hours a day, Monday through Friday. And throughout the week, when I do come home and I finally get a chance to sit down and just start to relax, and then I might feel okay, and then fatigue starts to set in. And the worst thing to do would be to start a show in midweek and having fatigue start to set in and not being able to concentrate. That wouldn't make for a good episode. I would just be all over the place. It'd be a mess. So, but there has been times where I have come out midweek to do a show because I just got right to it, before I even, get home, get changed, get showered, and then boom, you know what? If I do this right now, I'm going to be okay. But if I just sit and relax, put my feet up, then I'm going to start getting tired. So I have done shows, midweek. So I can't say that I haven't, because I have. And that's just without warning too. I mean, it's not even posted. It's not even up on Podbean. I just, boom, start the show. So now if I get off my butt today and I go on Amazon, and I could probably have a tripod by this evening, because I have Amazon Prime. So I could probably even get it this evening. And then, I think it'd be like really cool just to go around different areas of the city and do a short video, and then talk about that on the podcast. So just trying something different, and then you'll be able to see those short videos, for upcoming episodes too, like, for here, and you'll be able to see me. I don't know why Podbean doesn't have anything like that, that you could, because people who do live shows on YouTube or other social medias and stuff like that, why doesn't Podbean turn around and have something like that you could, I could be doing this episode, and, you could actually see me. I think that'd be something maybe Podbean could look into. I don't know. But in the meantime, like I said, I'll just be posting short videos on YouTube, and that's where you'll be able to see me. So I hope everybody has had a good weekend so far. I woke up this morning and we have snow on the ground. Not a lot of snow, just a little light dusting on the ground. It's been a while since we've had any snow here in southern Ontario. But they're talking about a system coming in midweek. It could get a little messy. It's going to be kind of sporadic and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, Christmas. What is it today? Today's the 11th today. Christmas isn't that far away. You know, Last year we had no snow on the ground for Christmas. The year before we had no snow on the ground for Christmas. The year before that we had no snow on the ground for Christmas. I mean, people aren't rushing out there buying toboggans to go sledding. Maybe this year we'll have snow on the ground for Christmas. I don't know. I remember when I was a kid. I don't remember, I when I was growing up, we would have snow on the ground just like right after Halloween. And we'd have snow on the ground all the way right through to March. And you'd have that fresh fallen snow Christmas morning. And it's not even cold. I mean, it's cold, but it's not cold. We're like +3 right now. And it's like this snow that fell last night. I mean, it's melting already. It's not even going to stick around. Probably by tomorrow morning, it'll be gone. Like I didn't even have to. I looked out this morning. My car was covered in snow, and now it's not. It's just melted. It's just melted off the car. It's gone. So, but I mean, a little bit of cold doesn't hurt anybody. And like I say, I mean, I think it'll be, you know, I think it'll be fun to go out into the city, different areas. One particular place that I want to go to, I want to do it um, when the sun sets too, because um, Victoria Park here in the city of London, where I reside, is the centerpiece of the city. And every year, for as long as I can remember, all of the Christmas lights and decorations that they put in this park and light it up at nighttime. And they have the outdoor skating rink, which I went there when I was a kid, do outdoor skating and do a short video about Victoria Park, and then come on the show and do a show about that. I think that'd be really good. That's what I think anyway. So yeah, so anytime, ladies and gentlemen, just go on YouTube there. I think there's something like 4 videos, one 20-minute one, but I think the other 3s are a minute and a half or whatever like that for upcoming shows. Like, share, comment, check those out. And until we meet again, This is Sunday. Back to work this coming week. Actually, you know what? I actually have next Friday off, the 16th. I actually booked a me day. So I'll be able to do a Friday morning show. Just haven't figured out what time it would be at. But, I could say 9 a.m. on the 16th, this Friday. I think it would be a good time. And of course, it'll be posted up here on Podbean. So if you're following me, you'll get that notification that, Truckers Podcast is going to start shortly, or you know when it's going to be. And of course, there'll be a short video up on YouTube about the upcoming episode. And that topic just yet? Well, I mean, there's lots of things. Let me take a second here and look to see what stuff I have saved in this one file here. See what I've got down here. No, you need to scroll down here. That's what you need to do. Okay, it doesn't want to scroll down on me here. So I don't know why it doesn't want to do that, but oh, here we go. Now it wants to move. I think I got to change the battery in my mouse because it kind of just, the cursor just decides that it doesn't want to do. So what did I else have up here? I did the cost of living yesterday, if anybody was listening to that. Let me see. Oh, there's one here that I wanted to know. I wanted to do was because of the teacher support workers, they ratified their deal. It's like took forever. In the Ontario government invoking the notwithstanding clause and imposing a contract upon them. I thought that was wrong, right? I mean, people have the right to strike and have that right to collective bargaining, and by the provincial government invoking the notwithstanding clause took those rights away from them. But they did ratify a deal, and so the union, what they had to say about the deal, we'll talk about that on Friday morning at 9 a.m. It's actually, quite interesting. And, from the raise that they were looking for to the raise they got, there's quite a difference. So we'll talk about that Friday morning at 9 a.m. And I've got a busy day ahead of me for a Sunday. You think, Sunday is supposed to be that chill day. You're supposed to be able to relax and chill and do nothing on a Sunday. I did my Christmas shopping last Sunday. So I got all that done. So I don't have to, because I used to be a last minute shopper. I'd be at the stores on the 24th, scrambling, panicking. Oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to buy? Not this time. Not this time. Did it in one day. It's got to be a record. It's got to be. For me, it's a record. Because I never do it in one day. But I did. This time I did it. So now, yeah, I do have stuff to do today, obviously, even though, I mean, I have to get stuff ready for work upcoming week, so, and some visiting that I got to do. And yeah, I'm going to order that tripod that I want. And it's a really good one. It looks pretty sturdy too, because nothing worse than, if it had been a breezy or windy evening or something like that, and it tumbles over and the phone goes down, and yeah, that wouldn't be good. So, but it looks like it's pretty good. So I got to get on that, get that ordered, and yeah, start doing just small videos from around my city, and starting with our centerpiece of our park, and going around the city on other days, because there is so much heritage, here in the city of London, Ontario, to talk about, heritage buildings and stuff like that. They're actually pretty cool. So we'll start doing some stuff like that, and of course, whatever comes in mind or something that I feel I need to really share with you. Obviously, we'll be doing that. But thank you for joining me today and taking the time out of your day to join me here on the Truckers Podcast. So until next time, Friday, December the 16th at 9 a.m. If you can join me, that's great. If you can't, I understand. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Enjoy your upcoming week. And thank you. This is the Truckers Podcast. FYI, I'm your host, Doug. Take care. Oh, don't forget to check out YouTube, Truckers Podcast, FYI.